Hello everyone, this is Akash Chauhan, and in today's lecture we are going to start Unit 4, which is Servlet. And this unit is only dedicated, how to build Servlet, how to use Servlet, and what is the significance of Servlet when you are, when you need to design a web application. Okay, when you are supposed to design an internet-based web application. So let's focus. Let's start. What is a Servlet? Okay. So Servlet is a Java technology which is used to create web application. This is what we have just discussed. Till now we have seen, so this second point is actually saying that we have seen how to design a desktop based application, but nowadays everyone is connected with the internet. So the application which are being used over internet, are in scope these days. So Servlet is basically, providing us the framework or the structure to, build those services over internet, which we can invoke through URL. Okay, and the servlets are, built upon, built by using Java, and they make us use of all the features of Java, like portability and security of the Java. So it means if we want to use the the features of Java, Servlet is the best way to build web services. So when we are about to design our web services, we use Servlet based technology. So the second point I would like to explore more about what it means to be a web based technology. See, this kind of programs we have implemented so many times. We write a class, we write a main method, and main method we write our logic, the business logic. And once we run this program, the JRE or the Java runtime environment would find this method and start executing automatically from this line onward. Okay, so this is basically the design of a desktop-based application. This is not a web-based application because we have not invoked anything. This main method would be executed by the JRE automatically. Whenever I run this code, this would be executed automatically by the JRE. This is not a web-based service. Web-based service should be like that. There are some services over the internet, and for each services mapped with a unique URL. And if I hit that URL, that particular service will be invoked. Okay, so if I hit a particular URL with some input, then that input become the input for that service, and that service over the internet or the web server would take that request and take that those inputs and use those inputs during the web execution of that particular service and return back the response. So it means there are many services over the internet. Okay, like this, as you can see, uh, if we hit the web browser, okay, hit the web browser, a particular HTTP request will be generated. Okay, and after generating that request, it will reach to the web server. There would be some services returned in different ways. Let's say if you are using PHP, so you can write services in some ways over there. When you use Java over the server, then servlet is a way you can write some services. So for particular user, the user would request something, and a particular service will be executed over the web server, and a particular response will be forwarded to the web browser again. Okay, so this particular desktop based application, as you can see, this point is talking about that till now we have seen how to create desktop based application, and now we have to create web based application in which there is a client, there is a server. So the client would hit some URL, and that URL particular, let's say 1000 services we have written over the web server, and one particular service will be executed according to the HTTP request, which is being forwarded from the client to the server, and the server further can be connected with the database server as well. Okay, so this particular service, let's say 1 out of 10,000 services, we want to invoke only one for this particular HTTP request, and that particular service will also include the transaction with the database as well. And accordingly, after executing that particular service, a HTML response will be generated and that response will be forwarded to the client back. Okay, so this is actually the architecture. But my question is, this should be a genuine question, that if we can write logic in Java, then what is the need of a servlet? We can directly use the Java over the web services. So why cannot we design the web services by using simple Java? Why do we need to use servlet? So this genuine question should be there. So if we want to design a desktop based application or execution based softwares, then we go through this SE model. Okay. If we want to design a web based application, then we have to follow the J2EE. Okay. This enterprise way of working. Okay. Because we want to develop an application over the server. So the question was, why do we need to use Servlet? Okay, so the simple, if we write code in simple Java, okay, because being a developer, let's say if I write things in Java without any structure, then every time whenever the HTTP request would come to the server, it will always be complex for the server to figure out what to do. But if there is a proper structure or a framework to to know what to execute, then it would be great, right? If a HTTP request would come, then a particular service attached to that HTTP request will be executed. So if we follow such kind of a structure, then it would be great, right? So the servlet actually provides us that kind of a framework or a structure. Okay, so that predefined structure will be there. So if let's say if we hit a particular URL, and according to that a particular service, and in that service a particular method will be executed, so that is called the service method. So in that service method, if we write what we want the server to be executed, okay, whenever the server would access a particular request, then that particular code written in that service inside the service there, inside that you know services, there would be a particular method which would ask you to write some code for, to put your business logic there. Okay, so there is a structure, okay, provided by the servlet, which if you follow, then HTTP protocol will automatically figure out what to execute. So that if you want to follow the structure, then you use the servlet, which is a pre-built the structure in Java, and all the libraries are there to support. And you know uh, what I'm talking about the service. Let's say this is the servlet I have created. My servlet is the servlet, and this service method will be there. So whenever, let's say, the if this particular HTTP request, let's say this is index at the end of the URL, you are trying to access the index or the default resource of the server, okay, of your application. Then for that index, this my servlet will be mapped to that URL, and there would be many method inside this particular servlet, but a main important method would be the service method, because all the business logic we are supposed to write in the service method, because this execution will happen automatically due to the structure of the servlet. So if we invoke my servlet, this method will automatically be executed. Okay, we will discuss about this structure and the parameter later on. But as of now, you need to focus on that there is a servlet. Servlet provides us some kind of a structure, and there would be a service method in which we are supposed to write our business logic. And whenever we invoke that servlet through a URL, okay, this my servlet will be invoked using the URL. We will see later on whenever we will be discussing web.xml, how to use web.xml in servlet. We will see how to invoke this servlet using a URL, a particular URL. How can we map this servlet to a particular URL? So whenever you hit that URL, this particular servlet will be called, and more precisely, this particular service method will be called. And here we are supposed to write our business logic, okay, because this will be executed eventually whenever you invoke that particular index or this particular servlet. So this is the basic structure, and every servlet has such kind of a service method. So there are many ways to build the service method, but there has to be a service method which will be executed automatically by the servlet container. Okay, so this web container is basically to have the the web container would provide you the memory to have the servlet. Okay, the runtime servlet. Okay, because you don't want to have it in the the servlet would be as a code in your server. The server would perform the servlet as a service. Okay, for that the container has to be there which would have the servlet objects. Okay, because servlet, if servlet objects, let's say in this code my servlet object would be there inside the web container. So whenever the request will be generated, http request, okay, so this particular servlet object will be invoked. So if that object is there inside the container, then it would be super fast to execute the relevant code. So the relevant code would be the service. So this container would have all the live objects. Okay, so this is the overview of servlet. So servlet is basically used to provide the structure to the code, to the flow of the request and the response and the business logic execution cycle. There are many ways to implement servlet. This is one of the ways. This is called the generic way to develop a method, develop a servlet in which you extend the generic servlet abstract class. So generic abstract class, if you extend this class, then any name you write over here will become a servlet. Okay, there are three ways to develop this. I'll show you. If you, this is the interface, this is generic, sorry, this is abstract class, this is again abstract class, this is your servlet. So either if this is the interface, then it means you are supposed to implement it. Okay, if this is abstract class, both of these abstract classes, then you, if you simply extend it, then you can use this class. Okay, this also you can extend it because it's an abstract class. I'll come to this point soon, but let's understand there are three ways to build your own servlet. Either you implement servlet interface, or you extend generic servlet or http servlet. Okay, they are the both of these are abstract classes. Abstract classes means not all the method, okay, have not all the method, or at least one method would be there which is only declared inside the generic servlet or http servlet. And what are those methods? So if we talk about servlet, it means all the methods are all these methods. So init method, service method, destroy method, get servlet config or get servlet information, these are all methods inside the interface. So all the methods would be undefined. So if you are implementing servlet, it means you would provide the definition of all the methods. Okay, so this is one way. Second way is generic servlet method. So if you use generic servlet, okay, it is abstract class. It means there would be at least one such method which you are supposed to define, which is not actually defined inside the generic servlet. That's why it is called the abstract class, and the method name is service method, which we have seen over here. So if you are trying to use the generic servlet, if you want to extend it, then you have to provide the definition of the service method, because this is the method where you are supposed to write your business logic. Okay, and this particular way is also free to be used by any protocol. If there is a http request, then you can execute this service method. If there is a ftp request, then also you can execute this method. If you have a smtp request or smtp protocol is being used to access the mail or send a mail, then also this service method can also be executed. So that's why it is called the generic servlet. Okay, which is written over here, helps to create protocol independent servlet. It means it is not dependent on any protocol. But if we talk about http servlet, this is restricted to be specific to http. Okay, helps to create http specific protocol only. It means if instead of generic servlet, if we write over here http servlet, okay, so there would be some if as there this http servlet is also abstract class, it means there would also be some methods, or at least one method which is not defined, which we are supposed to define in the extended class. Okay, So as we have extended the service method, we have defined it by our own. If we write it over here HTTP servlet like this, I'll show you. So there are methods like doGet or doPost. So at least for one method you have to define. Okay, so it is similar to that. When you use generic servlet method, only one method you have to define. Okay, but when it comes to HTTP servlet, okay, there are two methods, do get or do post. At least one of these methods you have to provide the definition. Okay, generally if you are extending the HTTP servlet, you provide do get and do post all together. You have to provide both, but it is optional. You can provide even the one definition of do get method which you can use, because if you don't provide the definition of all the undefined methods over here, this will also become an abstract class. Okay, because if it is not abstract class, it means whichever it is in, or whatever class it is extending, or whatever interface it is implementing, this particular class would be concrete, or it will provide you the definition of all the methods, either from the child class or the super class. So if you provide the do get, the do get or do post, you simply provide the definition of both the methods. Okay, I'll show you. So in HTTP servlet, there are do get and do post method which are undefined. So you can define your own. Okay, do get is to perform when you simply just to perform the logic return in the server, but do post is when you want to make changes in the database as well, or in the application as well. So I'll come to those points in detail, but as of now you just need to understand when it comes to generic servlet, you have to implement service method, you have to provide your own definition. Okay, when it comes to servlet, you have to provide all the definition of all the methods. When it comes to HTTP servlet, you have to provide the do get or do post method definition. This is your servlet. If you are implementing HTTP servlet, you simply provide the definition of do get and do post. So whenever, let's say, if this is actually the first one, this is the servlet in which we have provided the definition of all methods. Okay, because it is implementing servlet is the interface, and which is implemented by my servlet, in which in that my servlet would provide the definition of all the methods. And it is when you initialize a servlet, so if you want to perform some task, you can provide your own data, you can provide your own definition over here. Service method is similar to the generic uh, servlet method. Okay, but if you use simple generic method, only one method you have to provide. But in case of the servlet interface, you have to provide service method definition and all rest of the methods. Destroy is when the servlet is about to destroy, you want to show something to the user, you want to perform some task, you want to close some files. This get servlet information. So whenever you want to get the information, you can use this method. Okay, so you can perform some task over here as well. Get service configuration, it is related to the configuration when we will be discussing about the web xml file, and how the web xml file would decide which servlet will be invoked, which servlet among all the servlet we have designed will be invoked. Then we will get to know the use of get service configuration. It means the configuration of this servlet we can access, or we can fix the configuration of a servlet here as well. So these are the methods we have to provide the definition. In case of generic, only one method we have to provide the definition. If we want to use the HTTP servlet, even if we provide the do get method or do post method definition, at least one method definition should be there in order to invoke this particular service. So what it means to have all these methods. Okay, let's come to this point. If there is a client, it is hitting a particular URL, and according to that URL, a particular servlet will be executed. Okay, so if we have three servlet, let's say the servlet interface, generic servlet based interface, HTTP servlet based servlet, then we have three type of servlet. Okay, according to this particular request, the web XML file later on we will discuss will decide among these three which will be invoked. So this container would have the object of all those three servlet, but only one servlet will be executed according to the this particular URL. So we have not decided that yet. because we have not explored the web XML file for the servlet. We have seen this for the JSP earlier, but how to design a web XML file for a servlet, we will see in the next lecture. Because we have designed, we know how to create different objects for different servlet, but how to map a particular request to a particular servlet. This we will see in the next lecture. In the next lecture, we will explore how to write a web XML file. In subsequent lectures, we will also implement all these codes, okay, in our IDE. And for that, we need Tomcat, as we have already, used it in the JSP as well. Okay, so nothing new is required. Only just make sure that you have the J2EE IDE, okay, and the Tomcat pre-installed over your system, and you must have integrated the Tomcat with your IDE. So this is all about the servlet. This is actually the introduction of servlet. This is not enough to implement a servlet. With the next lecture, I think if we are done with the first two lectures of servlet, we can design our own application in servlet. So this is all about the introduction of servlet, how to, there are three types of servlet, and what is a servlet and all. So thank you so much, guys. This is all for today's lecture. From next lecture, let's discuss how to map a particular URL to a particular servlet. So if we hit a particular URL, that particular servlet will be executed over the server. So that's all for today. Thank you so much, guys.